You know what's insane? Right now, as you're listening to this, the Federal Reserve is creating money, not printing it, creating it, out of nothing, just typing numbers into a computer. In 2020 alone, $6 trillion. Poof, created. But here's what'll break your brain. Pick up any dollar bill. Top left corner. It says Federal Reserve Note. A note is debt. It's an IOU, like a car loan. It means someone owes someone else money. So if the Fed creates trillions of dollars out of thin air, who do they owe it to? There was no lender. No one gave them the money. They just made it appear. So who's the creditor? The answer reveals that the entire financial system is an engine designed to transfer wealth from your pocket to private banks. And it's been running for over 100 years. Let's follow the money. Most Americans think the Federal Reserve is part of the government, like the IRS or the Treasury. It's not. The Fed is a private banking cartel created in 1913 by figures like JPMorgan, the Rockefellers, and the Rothschilds. They sold it to the public as a tool for economic stability, but what they really wanted was total control of the nation's money supply. Here's how it's structured. There are 12 regional Federal Reserve banks in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and so on. Each one is a private corporation with shareholders. And who are those shareholders? JPMorgan Chase, Bank of America, Goldman, Sachs. They literally own the central bank. Now, there's a board of governors in D.C., and its members are appointed by the president. That sounds like government control, right? It's theater. The private regional banks do the real work. They are the ones creating the money. They hold the assets. They run the show. And by law, the Fed must pay its member banks a 6% annual dividend. Guaranteed. Risk-free. That payment happens before any of the Fed's profits go to the U.S. government. A private banking cartel that creates unlimited money and pays itself first. That's the system. So how does the scam actually work? Let's follow a dollar. Step 1, the government needs money it doesn't have. Congress passes a $5 trillion budget, but tax revenue is only $3 trillion. That's a $2 trillion deficit. Step 2, the Treasury issues bonds. These are just IOUs, promising to pay back the loan with interest. They auction off $2 trillion in bonds. Step 3, the Federal Reserve buys, say, $500 billion of those bonds. Here's the magic trick. Where does the Fed get $500 billion? They open their computer, they type $500 billion, and it appears. No gold, no assets, no deposits. Just created by a keystroke. The Treasury gets the cash, and the government keeps functioning. But now the government owes the Federal Reserve $500 billion, plus interest. At 3%, that's $15 billion a year. Where does that $15 billion come from? Your taxes. Every year, over $1 trillion in federal tax revenue goes to paying interest on the national debt. Money that could build roads or fund schools is instead funneled into interest payments. And a huge chunk of that goes straight to the Federal Reserve. This is the wealth transfer machine. The Fed creates $500 billion at a cost of zero. They use it to buy Treasury bonds. The government gets the money, but is now in debt to the Fed. That debt carries an interest payment of $15 billion a year. That interest is paid for by your paycheck through taxes. So the flow is simple. You work, you pay taxes. The government pays the Fed. The Fed takes its profits. And then the member banks get their guaranteed dividends. Money flows directly from your labor to the balance sheets of private banks. The mechanism? The Fed creates money from nothing and then charges interest on it. This has been running for over 100 years. Trillions of dollars transferred from the public to the banks. It's perfectly legal because the banks wrote the law.
Let's talk about the national debt. But forget everything you've been told. It's not about reckless spending. It's about something much deeper. Here's the mind-blowing part. The national debt cannot be repaid. Not because we can't afford it, Because the system was designed from the very beginning to require permanent, ever-increasing debt. Think about it. Where does a dollar come from? Every single dollar you've ever held exists because the Federal Reserve bought government debt. When the Fed buys a treasury bond, it just creates the dollars to pay for it, which means every dollar is debt. So what happens if we become fiscally responsible and pay it all back? The government would collect your tax dollars and return them to the Fed to pay off the bonds. But when the Fed receives a dollar as payment for debt, that dollar is destroyed. It vanishes from the money supply. Paying off all the debt means the money supply drops to zero, instantly. No dollars to pay workers, no dollars to buy food. Total economic collapse. This is the real reason the debt has increased almost every single year since 1913. The debt can't decrease without destroying the money we use to live. But it gets so much worse. It's an exponential trap. See, when the Fed creates, say, $500 billion and lends it to the government now owes $500 billion plus interest, say another $15 billion. But here's the catch. That $15 billion for the interest was never created. It doesn't exist. So where does it come from? It has to be taken from other dollars already out there, meaning someone else must go into debt to create it. Or the government has to borrow more money just to pay the interest on the old money. This creates a spiral. More borrowing creates more interest, which requires more borrowing. It's a mathematical certainty that debt will grow faster than the money supply. Right now, the national debt is $36 trillion, growing by $2 trillion a year even after collecting $5 trillion in taxes. The math isn't just broken, it's rigged. A few presidents saw this for the scam it is. They tried to stop it, and it didn't end well for them. In 1835, Andrew Jackson did the impossible.
He paid off the entire national debt. He refused to renew the charter of the central bank, calling it a den of vipers. The result? 5 months later, the Panic of 1837, a catastrophic depression. Without new debt, the money supply contracted and the economy imploded. Fast forward to 1963. John F. Kennedy signs Executive Order 11110. It authorized the Treasury to issue its own debt-free money, backed by silver, completely bypassing the Federal Reserve. Over $4 billion in United States notes were printed. 5 months later, Kennedy was assassinated, and one of Lyndon Johnson's first acts as president was to halt the printing of those notes. Coincidence? Maybe. But every president who challenged the system faced serious consequences. So if the government is in permanent debt, who do they owe? Who's the ultimate creditor? And here's the most twisted part of all. No one. The Fed creates the money from absolutely nothing. There is no original lender. They don't owe anyone. But the United States government owes them. And who owns the Fed? It's not the government, it's a cartel of private banks. So the chain goes like this. Private banks own the Fed creates money from thin air and lends it to the government then taxes you to pay interest back to the Fed, which flows directly to those private banks. Your tax dollars are paying interest to a private club on money they simply invented. Every dollar in your wallet, every Federal Reserve note is just evidence of a debt your government owes to private bankers, a debt that can never be repaid. This is the greatest heist in history. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 wasn't a financial reform. It was the privatization of money itself. It gave a small group of bankers the legal right to profit from the debt of an entire nation forever. Over $1 trillion of your tax dollars every single year go to just servicing this debt. Interest payments flowing to the very people who created the problem out of nothing. If you want to understand who really runs America, don't look at the president, don't look at Congress, look at who owns the money printer.